Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, and having a good week and all that. And in this video, I got a story from Oregon, a story from Florida, a story from a house, and a story from Columbus, Ohio. So, if that sounds like something you like to hear, then definitely pull up a stump and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I've never talked about these events in my life, and I've never even explained them to anyone, so bear with me. When I was 6 years old, my poor family moved to a house in Redding, California, which we reference as the Blue House. My dad worked construction in San Jose, about a 4.5 hour commute, so he was never home, ever. The house we rented had previous tenants that were devil worshippers. We knew this after we moved in, and we found all sorts of random stuff like devil runes behind the mirrors and everything. My dad was a hellfire brimstone Southern Baptist, ultra god tier, and knows how bad that these things are. Long story short, here are the experiences just in the Blue House. My mom woke up to a dark entity choking her in her room, according to her account. My sister said a burned man would stand over her bed when she was 8 years old and walk into her closet when she woke up. According to her account, and that closet was also facing my room. I had bunk beds in my room, and I always slept on the top one because I was afraid. When your mom is getting super sketched out and your dad is miles away, what else do you do at 6 years old? I wake up in the middle of the night one time to my sister screaming. I wake up underneath the bunk bed, as in completely under the bed, all the way against the wall, and I think, how the hell did I get under here? Some other info is that my great-grandfather was a very bad man, a rapist, an alcoholic, sexually abused my grandmother and my uncle, and he had this locked dungeon where he would do stuff to girls of varying ages against their will, but he was also a carpenter and made furniture. He died in the fire when his shop went up in flames, and being poor, my family willingly inherited some of the furniture that he had built in his shop, and ironically, there was this oak dresser that was still in the shop when I went up, but it was untouched, and I had been given that dresser for my clothes since I was 6 years old. So I connected the dots. Satanic influences have triggered the piece of furniture that was imbued with lingering dark energy from my great-grandfather. So, fast forward to my adult life and skipping many other instances. My sister, at age 29, buys a house in San Jose and needs items to furnish the new place. My dad donates a ton of stuff that he kept in storage after my parents got divorced, like 18 years prior to this. They split when I was 7, and he still had a storage place for all this stuff. Among the items, the oak dresser is moved into her new house, and suddenly, that night, the burned man returns. My sister's fiancé openly mocks her for believing in this, but the paranormal events escalate. Her fiancé is choked in his bed and thrown across the room, just like my mom had been. My sister is the hippie type and burns sage in the house to cleanse it, but it doesn't work. I was convinced that the dresser was the root of all of my sister and I's experiences throughout our lives, so we decide to burn the dresser. We take the dresser out into the desert and burn it, just scorch the thing, then we bury the leftover ashes in the dirt. The events have completely stopped ever since. Side notes: when you are marked by a demon, you become familiar to them, and they seek you out. They know your name, your scent, your aura, and manipulate demi-demons to aid them. I wasn't aware of the devil marks behind the mirrors in the Blue House until I was 27, and I was talking to my dad. I've had one reoccurring dream of the devil pulling me through a mirror since I was 15. Could this be connected? I don't know. I don't talk about this because in my experience, the more you acknowledge it, the more you give it attention to these thoughts and spirits, they become more prevalent and they become more powerful. Advice: if anything paranormal happens to you, just don't give it energy. Try to get rid of it and move on. I work at a fast food joint on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. I work the night shift, so I'm routinely trapped in that place until 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not that bad though. I get paid extra for working late, and I don't have class until the early afternoon. The downside is that it's spooky as hell. The restaurant is located the corner block in a lower income area. It's a very strange place for a fast food joint, as there really isn't a lot of businesses around besides the gas station across the street, and the block the place is on seems to be mostly residential. The majority of houses are one story and in various states of disrepair. There are 3 ways in and out of the store. There are 2 doors in the lobby. One gets locked at 8 p.m. for safety reasons, and the other one gets locked at 10 p.m. when the lobby closes. It's a common practice for employees to unlock these doors after 10 p.m. to go smoke. They just stand outside the door while smoking, then lock the door as they come back in. Sometimes, though, they forget to lock the door behind them, and sometimes they let people in by accident. Now, whenever people come in after close, you can always tell by the door chime ringing throughout the place, and whenever that happens, 2 employees would go out to the lobby and tell whoever was standing there that we're sorry but the lobby was closed and they'd have to leave. And they always do. There's never been a problem, just sometimes people make mistakes. The other night I was working with John, a tall guy, and Katie, she's short and red-headed. The shift was going as usual, albeit a little slow due to the falling snow. At about 1 a.m., however, we hear the door chime ring. The sign a lobby door has been opened. John and I go to the lobby, prepared to tell whoever was in there that we're sorry but the lobby was closed and they'd have to leave. Now, as I said, there's a 3rd way out of the building. It's a door in the very back of the store that they use to load food and stuff off the supply truck every week. It only opens from the inside, and an alarm sounds whenever you open it, and it keeps sounding until the code is entered. And it goes off. We rush to the back to check it out. The door's already closed, it shuts mechanically, but the alarm is still blaring. I enter the code to stop the alarm, and we look around and realize that nothing is out of the ordinary. But then we realize that John is not in the back with us, he's out in the lobby. The door chimes again. Katie and I run back out to the lobby to see John sprinting outside into the darkness and the snow. We don't follow. We are too scared to go out into the night with whatever made John go crazy like this. We lock the door back up and we figured that John will call us to let us know when to let him back in. He won't be long, the snow is overwhelming and we figure he just maybe needs some time to calm down. But he didn't even take his coat. He never did call back. He never came back. No one has even seen him since. His coat is still hanging up in the break room. I just wish I knew what he saw to make him run away like that. I want to know if he's okay, but I never want to know how close it was to being me that ran out into the darkness in a crazy fit of fear like that. So this story begins with me helping my grandmother by painting her house. Due to the fact that this lady on a ladder would at best result in a broken hip and at worst a broken neck. I suppose she could have hired some professional painters, but she happened to live in the middle of nowhere, the Dalles, Oregon, and our family has this annoying habit of staying poor, so hiring laborers was much too costly. Some more context is my whole family on my mother's side are Jehovah's Witnesses, or Jehobos as I like to call them. I'm guessing this happened sometime after the family crossed the Atlantic. This has led to them becoming very strange, but nothing that would warrant a serious intervention. For example, they are firm believers in the paranormal, and that invoking God's name can thwart off all threats. All in all, after studying my family history, I decided that this was a major improvement from our semi-nomadic gypsy past, which had a tendency to give me the shivers thinking about the strange and weird things that my ancestors did. So, I arrive at my grandmother's house on a small lot of land in the middle of nowhere. A few houses are within eyesight, but the place is quite isolated. The only noise that you can hear, aside from the noise you make, was the neighbor's rooster in the morning. As soon as I got to the door, she tries to sell me on this month's issue of The Watchtower, a church-issued magazine. I said, "Yeah, okay, Grandma, so what parts of the house am I painting?" Now, she had just moved into this house herself, so she gave me a tour. The first thing that I noticed is how basic it was. She wasn't at risk of freezing, but there were patches with no insulation. Instead of paint on many of the walls, there was this ancient cheap wallpaper that was fading. The whole place gave me this run-down and cheap feel. One bit that weirded me out was how strangely the house was planned out, or how little of it was actually planned out. There were seemingly random doorways and chambers, which was a little unnerving, considering that many of these rooms served little obvious purpose. The house was medium size, which was large considering that it was only housing my grandmother and her 12-year-old Shih Tzu. The creepiest thing about the place was all the abandoned stuff everywhere. Books, clothes, rusty tools, kitchenware, children's toys, etc. Apparently, her inner gypsy kicked in and decided that all this leftover worthless trash was acceptable. That, or she needed a cheap place, and when the landowner said "as is," they really meant "as is." It becomes apparent that this trip to paint her house may extend a few days, so I can make her home somewhat respectable and more habitable. I decide that I'll get started on the place first thing in the morning, seeing as how I arrived at about 8:30 and it was now nearly 10 p.m. So we eat dinner in the living room and I get set up on the couch. About 30 minutes into trying to sleep, I'm ripped from my trance by the sound of footsteps down the hallway. "Grandma?" I say. No response. I don't know what's going on, but I suddenly feel anxious, so I reach down to the floor and pull up my pocket knife out of my shoe, as if that would be my lifeline or something. Something about this place just gives me bad vibes. When I'm fumbling around on the ground for my knife, I can hear items being shuffled about in the impenetrable blackness down the hallway. I freeze. The fact that I can't see whatever this is causes me to get increasingly nervous, and I try to hold my breath. I know that if what it is starts coming toward me, I'll be able to see it coming by the bluish-gray moonlight cast across the hallway in a slanted square shape. In the silence that follows, I can hear my grandmother snoring loudly from down the hallway. Nothing happens for some time. Whatever it was didn't sound particularly threatening, just unexpected. As I attempt to go back to sleep, I can hear something softly pattering about in the attic, which starts to feel less threatening over time, and I eventually drift off to sleep. So the next morning, I ask my grandmother if she has a rodent problem, seeing as this house was anything but modern and critters could easily get in. "No rats or raccoons," she says. That's interesting, I think. We hear the crackling of her gravel driveway, and somebody in an 80s Chevy square-body truck stops outside the house. It's the neighbor. He starts explaining how he heard some weird stuff last night, and he wanted to make sure that I was aware of the property lines. Apparently, I upset the balance of this place by causing more than 30 mammals to be occupying the same 1,000 square yards, and now shit's getting real. I tell him, weird, because I haven't left the building since I got here, but we'll keep an eye out. Apparently, the last person to live here was another old lady that died about 10 years ago. At this point, I'm not too worried about anything, so I go about my plan to start painting. This goes on without incident for about 6 hours, until I start painting one of the purposeless rooms. The stepladder is facing a wall, and I'm on the top rung, painting the corner between the wall and the ceiling. I'm thinking about some sophomore girl and painting away, when I hear something above me that makes my heart sink. It's the kind of sound that is made when somebody makes a single step or puts pressure on one foot on a creaky floorboard, a kind of slow, moaning, creaky noise. I have a mini panic attack. I ditch the brush and jump off the ladder with my hands up, and I think, oh, friggin' rats. I get a little frustrated that I shaved 3 months off my life after exercising my heart like that over a damned animal. I'm calming down and I'm inspecting the room for anomalies until I see that there is a trap door leading to the attic from this room. And I think, okay, let's do this. And then I say, Grandma, could you come in here? I proceed to ask her about the attic and if she has started to store things in there yet, as my cousins moved her in here. Really, I'm just a gigantic scaredy cat, and I wanted her to be there while I checked it out. What a surprise. There's more leftover stuff up here. Also, other leftover stuff in the form of animal feces, confirming my suspicions. She's bringing in boxes for me to lug up here, when I find something strange. A ring of dead rose petals, some symbols written on the plywood, surrounding some dust and ash on a plain wooden figurine. For some reason, this featureless literal stick figure gave me a strong feeling of dread. What the F? I started to get this paranoid feeling that I didn't belong there, and that I needed to get the hell out of there. I immediately started telling my grandmother what I found, standing 12 feet above her and speaking through a square hole in the ceiling. Her eyes doubled in size, and she turns white. She starts shouting at me to grab the doll with her handkerchief and bring it downstairs immediately. I got to grab the doll, but the feeling of dread intensifies tenfold. I experienced this surreal feeling of torment, in which time slows down, and I fearfully gaze at the doll before grabbing it. The whole event lasted like 5 seconds, but it felt like minutes. I bring the figurine down and head towards the living room. The front door is open, and my grandma has clearly entered psycho mode. In the middle of the driveway, she's already made a small pile of firewood and lit it with some matches and some kerosene. She shrieks at me to hurry up and throw it in the blaze. We sat there, watching it burn, and I felt a huge catharsis, like all my worries were alleviated and the threat was gone. As we watched it burn, I looked at the details of the figure. It had no facial features, and the thing that was clearly handmade, you could see the chisel marks. About 5 minutes in to just standing there, watching this thing burn, we hear a loud bang. The front door had slammed shut and bounced open again, about 30 degrees ajar, creeping further. She invites me to come inside and pray with her. I don't fight her on this one at all. We come in and we pray, and she does some kinda not so good but very serious blessings around the house. We decide to call it an early day, and we play cards, talk, eat dinner, and finally go to bed. I'm seriously jolted by what I saw up there, but I'm able to keep my cool for now. This night was the same as last night, in the sense that right when I was about to get some sleep, I awake to some quiet noises in the darkness. This time, my heart is about to jump out of my chest as I realize that this is most likely not a raccoon. I'm staring down the hallway again, looking past my feet, waiting for something to step out of the moonlight and reveal itself. I can feel it creeping back there. As I start to breathe normally again, I can see something, just faintly in the light. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. It begins a kind of hurried walk towards me. The creature is 5 feet tall and humanoid, with long black hair. I can't distinguish features. Its skin is as black as the void, aside from white, glowing eyes. Before I can move, it reaches me, staring me dead in the eyes, inches from my face. I scream in terror. I honestly thought that I might have just died of fright because I saw nothing. I realized that I was dreaming and that the hallway is completely black. It was a cloudy night. A hallway light is flicked on and my grandmother comes out to check on me. I am speechless, but I can sense that she knows what happened. I decide to sleep on my grandmother's room that night, like a child. But honestly, I have never been more frightened by something that I can't see in my entire life. The next few days, nothing happened, although I never entered the attic again. My grandmother apparently had some elders come to her home and sanctify it, and she didn't mention anything else happening. She moved out of there about 6 months later, and I haven't been there since. The entity in question is something that I have read about only twice. They all describe it the same way. Short, black humanoid that moves quickly. I just wish I knew what the hell it was. I've got one good story that happened to me. It might be kinda meh to some of you, but, here it goes anyways. So this happened in my freshman year. My best friends and I have been best friends since we were little. We grew up together, we trained together, we fight together, we play together. We're like the Three Musketeers almost. For the sake of their privacy, we'll call them by their aliases that we use, Sky and Oni. So Sky, Oni, and I, to celebrate passing freshman year and surviving our first year of high school, we decided to do something fun. We had never been camping, and Sky's uncle, I'll call him Greg, is a pretty badass guy. To us, he was the definition of the most interesting man in the world from those commercials. He decided to take us camping, which I was very thankful for. I knew that we were safe as long as he was there. He brought 2 bows, a rifle, and a revolver. I don't know the specifics of each weapon, that's not really my forte. And he wanted to hunt some, so that's why he brought them. I was okay with a bow, and I know my way around a rifle and a pistol better than Oni and Sky do, because, at least I've shot one before. So after some driving and stuff and a little bit of hiking, we get to our campsite, which is the swamps here in Florida. So it's muggy, hot AF, wet, and generally just a not so good day to be outside. But Greg, being Greg, is reveling in it. He even carries most of the gear and is having the time of his life. So we set up camp in a dry spot, and Greg sets up some sound traps in case some gators or whatever else decided to drop by. Everything is set up and night starts to fall. Things get cool, we set up a fire, and I get tired, so I head to bed early, along with Sky. Oni and Greg are talking, which sounds like ASMR through the tent walls. They were thick. Sky and I drift off when we're waken up by what sounds like a tearing sound. I look up, and something is digging into the tent, It looks like a spike or something long and pointy. It takes me a moment to realize what's going on, but as I do, I flip out. I accidentally kick Sky in the face while scrambling out of the tent, screaming bloody murder. And while he's lying in the tent, clutching his bleeding nose, I get Greg, and Greg gets his gun. Greg circles the tent, all tactical and stuff, and surprise, surprise, like every good horror story, he can't find anything. I'm legitimately shocked though, because something was definitely brushing up against the tent and trying to push into it. Greg plays it off as an animal, which I didn't believe for a second it was a big-ass spike, and tells me to go back to sleep. I eventually do, and the rest of the night goes well. Then the fire gets put out, and Greg and Oni head off to bed a bit later. We wake up, and our campsite's not destroyed, we don't smell iron, and there's no dead animals. We wake up, and it's a completely normal campsite. Shit does hit the fan later, but I'll get to that. We go shooting, and we're just popping cans and stuff. I try to impress everybody with my mediocrity with a bow, and the day seems like it's going great. Up until the point where we hear this weird scream. Greg says it's probably a fox, but he doesn't know any that should be out this far. We go looking and we don't find it. The screams continue, but get more distant, and I say, "Oh, is it mating season?" And it was at this point that we did run across a mutilated possum. It didn't look like a gator did it. A gator wouldn't have gone this far into land just for a possum. That sounds stupid. So this possum is eviscerated, dead as dead can be. Its eyes are poked out and everything. It's like someone took their thumbs and shoved them into the eye sockets. Greg shakes his head, and we continue, playing it off as normal, as an animal. We get back to the campsite from where we were shooting and walking, and nothing's destroyed, but certain food items are missing. Nothing like bags of chips or anything, but some meat that we had that we plan to stew up and cook. Greg again says it's an animal, though it wasn't like it was torn from the boxes or coolers. It was more meticulous, methodical, like a human did it, opening everything up and then putting it back into place once it was done. So obviously I didn't like the vibe that this place was giving me anymore, so I told Greg, and he said that we'd definitely leave tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn. So of course, it storms that night, and that night is when things really just kinda climaxed. We're all trying to sleep, and while we are, something tears into the tent, like almost takes out an entire wall of the tent in one fell swoop. Greg hits his feet faster than anyone and goes in swinging. Sky, Oni, and I all get up and flood out of the tent in the opposite direction. Greg comes around the side unscathed, and he says, "Was that you guys?" We all tell him that we don't know what he's talking about, and we're just trying to figure out what took the wall out of the tent. And as we're talking, something leaps out from behind our cooler. It was long and on all fours. Greg ushers us into the car, grabbing the guns and setting them next to him in the front seat. As we're peeling out of there, Greg checks the rearview mirror, and there's something chasing after the car. Now, this is a very vague description of it. I don't remember the situation all too well because I tried to repress the memory for years. But like with all things like that, they eventually boil to the surface. So whatever this was running on all fours, and its head was covered in a skull, like a deer skull or something. You know how those ancient warriors used to wear an animal skull to show how tough they were? It was something like that. It had long-ass claws, and it was really, really pale. Eventually, it seems to tire out or something, because it stops in the middle of this pseudo-road/trail and just stares at us. We eventually get back into civilization and eventually back to our hometown, and we crash at Greg's. We speculate to this day as to what it was. Was it some insane hobo with crazy long nails? Some kind of weird cryptid thing? A monster? I honestly have no idea. So, what did you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own stories? I have an email address below in the description if you want to send them there. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, and those links are down there as well. And if you have any suggestions for videos, then you can either email me or you can just post a comment down below if there's a certain topic that you'd like to see me look into. But with that, thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.